Welcome back to StadiumRise. The FIFA World Cup 2026 opened on June 11 at Estadio Azteca in Mexico City. 87,000 people, a packed stadium. Pyrotechnics at kickoff, Mexico versus South Africa. The noise was overwhelming and the building was full. 24 hours later, at Estadio Akron in Zapopan, Guadalajara, South Korea versus the Czech Republic. The television cameras told a different story. Large sections of seats, visibly empty in the middle tiers, scattered gaps across the upper deck. An announced attendance of 44,985 in a stadium listed at a capacity of 45,664. Officially almost full. Visually something else entirely. The images went viral within hours. The debate they started has not stopped. 3 stadiums, Estadio Akron in Guadalajara, Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, and BMO Field in Toronto emerged from the opening weeks of the tournament with the most persistent questions about their attendance figures and their atmosphere. Not because they are bad stadiums, not because they are in bad cities, but because of a specific combination of factors: ticket pricing, visa restrictions, travel costs, and the mechanics of how FIFA distributes its tickets that have left these 3 venues, above all others, struggling to look consistently full on global television. Today, we go inside the problem, start with money, because money is where every empty seat in every World Cup since at least 2014 begins. FIFA's ticketing model for 2026 is built on dynamic pricing, a system borrowed from airlines and hotel chains, where prices fluctuate based on demand. In theory, dynamic pricing makes tickets cheaper for less popular matches and more expensive for high-demand games. In practice, at this World Cup, it has delivered something different. FIFA held back significant inventory from the initial public sale, creating artificial scarcity that kept prices elevated even for group stage matches between teams with no particular following, the host cities, the cheapest category of tickets. Category 4 was priced at $60 for group stage matches, on paper, accessible. In reality, Category 4 tickets accounted for less than 2% of the total inventory at most venues. The vast majority of seats were designated Category 1, the most expensive tier, with Category 2 and 3 making up most of what remained. By the time the general public got access to the ticketing platform, the affordable options were gone. What remained were seats priced in the hundreds of dollars at a tournament staged across 3 of the world's most expensive countries for travel and accommodation. An NBC News analysis found that attending a single World Cup match in the United States, 1 ticket, 1 hotel night, local transport, could cost roughly the equivalent of a month's rent in Chicago. For an average fan in the host country, trying to attend a match involving 2 nations with no significant diaspora in their city, the economic calculation became straightforward. The tickets cost too much, the hotels cost too much, and the choice, however painful, was made to watch at home. For Estadio Akron in Guadalajara, the problem was compounded by the specific teams it was assigned in the group stage: South Korea versus the Czech Republic, Ivory Coast versus Saudi Arabia, Japan versus Norway. These are not matches that generate spontaneous local demand in a Mexican city. Guadalajara has one of the most passionate domestic football fan bases in North America, the home of Chivas de Guadalajara and Club Atlas. But those fans turn out for Mexican club football and for El Tri. A group stage match between 2 European nations with no connection to the city requires visitors, and visitors need visas. The visa problem runs directly through the empty seat crisis at this World Cup. The United States requires visas from citizens of 39 countries that have qualified for the 2026 tournament: Ivory Coast, Senegal, Haiti, Iran, Cameroon, among others. Fans from these nations, many of whom had purchased tickets months in advance, found themselves unable to secure US visas in time for the tournament, or found the process so uncertain that they chose not to risk the travel. The result at specific matches was visible. Sections that should have been filled with Ivorian supporters in orange, sections that should have been filled with Iranian fans in white and green, empty instead. FIFA was aware of this risk before the tournament began. In the years of planning before 2026, football associations from affected countries had raised the visa concern directly and publicly. FIFA's response was to negotiate a special tournament visa, waiving certain normal requirements for ticketed fans. In practice, the waiver did not reach everyone it needed to reach. The embassies processed applications at their normal pace. The visa problem that everyone anticipated became the visa problem that actually happened. Estadio Akron bears the sharpest version of this wound. A stadium with a genuine identity, intimate, passionate, set against the backdrop of the Sierra Madre Mountains, that was given a group stage schedule featuring matches where a significant portion of potential attendees could not get into the country to attend them. The stadium is not the problem. The building is excellent. The problem is the ticket in the hands of a fan who cannot board the plane to use it. Levi's stadium in Santa Clara faces a different version of the same challenge. The stadium itself is extraordinary, $1.3 billion of Silicon Valley engineering, natural grass, the fastest Wi-Fi in any sports venue on Earth when it opened. But Santa Clara is not a football city in the way that Los Angeles, Miami, or even Seattle is a football city. The Bay Area has the San Jose Earthquakes, but MLS has not yet built the kind of deep supporter culture in the Bay Area that transforms casual interest into the spontaneous attendance that fills a stadium for an unfamiliar group stage match. When Levi's Stadium hosted Qatar versus Switzerland in its opening group stage match, the cameras caught it. 67,966 fans announced. Official capacity of 68,827. Officially almost full, but visually sections in the upper deck visibly sparse. FIFA's explanation that their attendance figures count tickets scanned at the gate, not literal bodies in seats, is technically accurate. Tickets were scanned, people entered, but they went to concourses, to food vendors, to fan zones within the stadium footprint. They were counted. They were not in their seats when the camera swept the upper deck during a 0 first half between Qatar and Switzerland. The Athletic ran the numbers across the tournament's first 6 matches. By FIFA's own figures, 1,574 seats were unfilled across those 6 games. That is a remarkably small number, suggesting 99.4% across the opening round. But the visual evidence from television broadcasts told a more complex story. Seats counted as filled by a scanned ticket are not necessarily seats that look full on a 4K broadcast going to 1.5 billion viewers worldwide. The stadium appears fuller on FIFA's spreadsheet than it does on the television screen of a football fan in Argentina or Germany watching the tournament. BMO Field in Toronto presents the third version of this problem, and perhaps the most symptomatic of a structural issue with how FIFA builds its tournament. BMO Field is the smallest venue in the World Cup at 45,736 seats. For Canada's own matches, the atmosphere has been extraordinary, an emotionally loaded fan base, historic first-home World Cup appearances, Jonathan David scoring goals that Canada has never produced on this stage before. The building for Canada matches has been loud, full, and exactly what a World Cup should feel like. But between Canada's group stage games, BMO Field hosted matches involving other nations. Bosnia versus Switzerland, Ecuador versus Ivory Coast. These are matches that do not generate the same local demand. Toronto's football community is diverse and passionate, but it is not infinite, and it cannot fill 45,736 seats 4 times in 2 weeks for group stage games between nations with limited North American following. The result has been matches at BMO Field that look, on television, notably less full than Canada's own games at the same venue. The contrast is stark enough that it has become part of the broader narrative that the expanded 48-team World Cup, with 104 matches across 39 days, has produced a volume of group stage games that outstrips the authentic local demand in certain cities for certain matchups. This is the structural problem at the heart of the empty seat crisis. It is not simply that fans cannot afford tickets, or that visa restrictions prevent attendance, or that some stadiums are poorly located for the matches they were assigned. It is all 3 of those things, simultaneously, applied to a tournament that is larger than any previous World Cup, staged across a continent where football still competes for cultural attention in ways it does not in Europe or South America. FIFA's public position throughout has been consistent and defensive. Attendance figures are strong, sales are solid, the tournament is breaking records. Gianni Infantino, in a press conference 3 weeks into the tournament, described the attendance as exceptional and challenged anyone who disagreed to look at the numbers. The numbers, by FIFA's own accounting methodology, support his claim. 99.4% capacity across the opening rounds is a genuine figure if you count every scanned ticket, but the images are also genuine, and the images, carried on every broadcast, shared on every social media platform, analysed by every football journalist with a screen and an opinion, tell their own story. A story about the gap between what a stadium looks like on paper and what it looks like on television. A story about pricing that prioritizes revenue over atmosphere. A story about visa systems that were always going to fail some of the fans who most wanted to come. The 3 stadiums at the center of this story, Estadio Akron, Levi Stadium, BMO Field, are not the problem. They are where the problem is most visible. The problem is a pricing model, a visa system, and a tournament format that together have created the conditions for empty seats in buildings that should have been full. Whether FIFA changes any of it depends on whether the final at MetLife Stadium on July 19, watched by 1.5 billion people globally, becomes the image that defines this tournament, or whether the empty upper deck at Estadio Akron during South Korea versus the Czech Republic is the one that gets remembered. Both images are real. Both tell part of the truth. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe and hit the bell. See you next week.